item.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome along to May 2020 Zoom meeting for Sorell Council. We have a full list of councillors available, so no need to call for apologies. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Would anybody like to declare a pecuniary interest after reading tonight's agenda? No, silence is duly noted. Confirmation of the minutes, the 21st of April 2020. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor De Williams and Deputy Mayor Reynolds, thank you. Any discussion on those minutes at all? I shall put that motion for acceptance. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Passed unanimously. 5.0 is the question on notice, the response from the General Manager there for recording. 6.0 is the Mayor's report. The mover and seconder, thanks. Councillor De Williams and Councillor Jackson, thank you. And invite any questions on my report. Councillor Gala.
Yeah, just a two-pronged question, if you like. I noticed on the second last item, you mentioned that you're continuing with your regular meetings with developers. First part of the question, is it mainly residential developers or commercial developers? And secondly, have you noticed in the last 90 days or so, is there still the same sort of vigour for developing the area with the developers that you're talking to, or are you finding that's dropping off a tad?
No, I'm not finding it dropping off at all. As you've seen through development applications, the number of subdivisions and planned development for future 5 to 10 year program is still as high as ever. Several other people that have looked at commercial ventures are proceeding with their planning, although a little bit more cautious because they don't know how the virus recovery is going to affect that, but still going ahead with everything there. I'd say there is no real change. Everybody I've spoken to, and would be probably about half a dozen in that area over the last 3 or 4 weeks, have all still been a little bit steadier, but still moving ahead quite constructively.
I see, and you're speaking with both commercial and residential developers still at quite high degrees, are you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Both evenly. Like certainly, there's a lot of people wanting to come into the area with commercial ventures, but we do not have the land available for that at the moment. But those that do have access to various parcels of land are still talking very positive.
Thank you.
Any other? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. A similar question, but in relation to the conversations through STCA and with politicians in terms of the impact of the coronavirus in the region, and what is shaping up to be a regional approach, if that's the right term, through STCA, etc.
At this point in time, there is no regional response because we're not sure what it needs to be. Everybody is falling in line behind the what the government and the health department are recommending.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is probably sitting on their hands a little bit, just waiting to see what that next step is. The awkward bit has been, of course, our budget period, and we know some councils are a lot more affected than others, and there's a lot of grumblings around what that may mean. The government itself has kept a pretty low profile. Ministers have not been sticking their head up for conversation, although they will have take private phone calls. They are not running around making any aspersions because none of them know what it's going to mean or what the timeline is. So everybody's just waiting. So there's been no substantial talk on how some of that may look over the next few months at this point.
Thank you.
Kerry, Councillor DeGrassi, can I just ask, did you have something to say? Your little black box keeps kicking in there. Did you want to ask a question?
I think it's more me kicking in doing something wrong.
As long as you still
Sorry, I moved.
No worries.
Yeah, I moved.
No, I just wanted to check.
Thank you.
Councillor De Williams.
With the funding from DSG and the business recovery for our businesses?
Yes, didn't catch the first part of that question.
Just asking about that meeting and about regarding the funding and how that's going to maybe resolve to help some of our businesses in the area that are really struggling.
Yeah, that's been a good effort by the Business Council, mainly Mick Dudgeon, the chairman, who worked with the TCCI to put that application in. We are issued with, it's about $8,500, I think, to assist in analysing what businesses are actually going to need. We had a phone link the other night to determine what the other regional areas are going to be looking at, and some of them, it's very grey indeed. What the Business Council wanted to do here in our region was utilise the person that is being put on through the funding from DSG, which is 3 days a week, 0.6 of a person. For the next several months, use that $8,500 to fund them for extra days to contact most of the business houses and first up ask them where they're at the moment, how they're feeling, what do they think, analyse that and talk to DSG and some other bodies about what that may be. I reckon it'll be the TCCI that probably coordinate that a little bit. Then again, as we start to go into the recovery, talk to them again about how they feel about starting up in the recovery. Now we're at that point where some of this will all flow into the one conversation. And we'll try and figure out, because our municipality is a little bit different to say down at Tasman, where it's a lot more tourism orientated. So we have to ascertain whether they're affected by that or what might need to be changed in their business to still keep them afloat. And that's what that extra money is for. Interviews were done for the DSG position for the ECT role. There was 6 or 8 people interviewed late last week, and the General Manager and I have just signed off on the documentation on the process they went through and the selection criteria and how they've made their selection. Hopefully by the end of this week we'll have that person appointed, and they'll be able to start fairly quickly to start to work with the Business Tasmania on the various requests they get for information. This position with the Business Council of Sorell and what Andrew Hyatt's doing. So it's another link and brings the business into alongside the employers and the people that are on government benefits that Marinda looks after. So we'll have just about all the boxes ticked in the next couple of weeks. Any other questions at all? If there's nothing else, then I'll put my report for acceptance. All those in favour?
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Thank you. 7.0 is supplementary items. 8.0 is the workshop and the items listed there that was discussed. 9.0 is departmental reports. Can I have a mover and seconder for these to be accepted, please? Councillor Nichols and Councillor Reid, thank you. And just raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question of one of our department managers. Councillor Terenius.
Am I right?
Yes, right to go. Yep.
Right, okay. Robert, are you at liberty to tell us the proponent of the Denali Marina at this stage?
Through the chair, I'm not, because there's 2 parties that are in the mix, if you like. So they're in the process of preparing their effectively a detailed business case for their respective submissions or concepts. The closing date was going to be early this month, but by virtue of the pandemic situation, they've extended it. So they've now both agreed through KPMG that it's the end of June. And then we'll know more as far as how each respective business case looks relative to the concept that they're proposing. And then hopefully there'll be at least a recommendation for council to engage with that body and to try and bring it to fruition. So there's still a fair bit to get sorted out with respect to the Crown as far as leases of the seabed and the foreshore. It's all Crown land, not council, but it may be that council may actually be the lessee and it might be sublet to the developer. It all depends on the machinations of their business case and what is or isn't going to suit. So there's two in the mix, and they're in the process of doing those two bodies of work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. The meeting, this is the General Manager's meetings, the meeting with Football Federation and South East United, I assume about Pembroke Park or related matters. Could you just, that was when? Late last week. Could you just tell us a bit more about that, please?
Through the chair, it was myself. It wasn't the CEO of the FFA in the end, or Football Federation Tas. It was another chap, Glenn McNeil, who's in the senior manager there. I can't think of his title, sorry. The club secretary, the two club, I presume they're coaches, president and coach, the two Rollins and Kim Griggs, who's the secretary, and councillors Jackson and Reynolds were present as well. It was really useful for me. I'm not that au fait with the soccer fraternity. Actually, not allowed to call them soccer, the football fraternity.
Yeah.
And it was a good opportunity to talk about the master plan as it sits, what we're looking to do to modify it, which we're still working out some of the options around there, but also what their grand plan is should funding become available to improve their facility. So it was a really useful discussion to have them all present. And we also touched on the Dodgers Ferry Junior Club as well, and what may or may not be happening with them. So it went for, I presume it was well over an hour, and yeah, I just thought it was really helpful. They're keen to, as if there's an opportunity as part of the pandemic recovery, if there's going to be large pots of money made available for these sorts of upgrades, they'd like to go in with us to try and access that money if it exists. And so they're keen for their master plan components to be built into ours, which is not a huge issue from my point of view. That's largely the same. There's a few detailed differences that they've wanted to include, which we hadn't, but it's not fatal. But also I'll put to them that, so they've got a design consultancy that they use for their master plans and capital works. And I asked them to provide me with some of the capital costs, indicative capital costs of all these improvements, because I need to be able to input that into a long-term financial plan and just see what it's going to do, because a lot of these components have a pretty short depreciable life, and which has a big impact on our annual depreciation budget. So it was a good chance to talk to them about the reality, some of the financial realities of Sorell, and they were, on the whole, pretty aware of it. They're aware of other councils who have invested in a lot of sporting facilities over the years, and they're sort of wearing the effects of that. So they're going to provide those costs to me, and I can put them into the long-term plan and see if we're going to have problems or not. If by some miracle a large amount of funding comes in for either the soccer or, for argument's sake, a new tennis club. But yes, otherwise it's just a really useful and timely meeting for me, because I hadn't really engaged much with particularly the South East United Club in the past.
Thank you.
And any other questions? Councillor Reid again.
So these about on any of the reports?
Yes, yeah, any of the departmental reports.
Departmental. Just on page 10, there's mention of the Copping gas to energy development. And I was just wondering, apart from the obvious environmental benefits, whether there's a financial benefit as well.
Yeah, through the chair there, I mean, you probably know more about than I do, Kerry, but there is, and I think that's one of the reasons why this application has come to fruition, because the existing transfer arrangement they've set up for the electricity generation from the landfill gas has been going really well, and I think they've got more capacity than what the current asset can accommodate. So it's actually to increase that capacity, which will have an economic benefit to the operation. But as to the specifics of those perceived economic benefits, I have to look into that one for you, unless the mayor knows.
Yeah, look, it has some ongoing benefits. It was slow to start because the initial cost set up with LMS. I think I've got that right. But it escalates as more and more gas extraction comes online. I'll find out a little bit more on exacting details for the next workshop on that.
And if I can go again, the Palmier Street, it was good to see some very positive feedback on that. Had a chat with Chris Sargent the other day, and he was pleased to see that he followed through with his feedback to council. And the only other thing was, open space and trails strategy is mentioned. We talked about it at the workshop. Is that when might that be released to the public?
I'll just give me 2 seconds through the mayor. I'm just looking for Russell. I think the pandemic situation hasn't helped from a timing sense of being able to work through it as a draft. We've certainly provided feedback on behalf of some councillors and staff as well to the consultant, and I know Russell's had a discussion with them about it, but we really need to sit down with them and go through it in detail to the extent that we are then content with what it is as a draft, and then for it to be adopted accordingly as the draft, and then go out for the public feedback. But yeah, it's been the inability to meet to go through some of these matters is in the way we'd like to do it. It's certainly had an effect on how quickly we're able to get it out.
Okay. So if there are any inquiries, we'll just refer them to you.
Yeah. Yep. Did I get any of that wrong, Russell, as far as the...
No, that's right. I think we'll probably do some work maybe to bolster up the implementation side of it before we give it to council for approval to go out for public consultation, won't we?
Yeah. Which is what we've discussed previously around the working at an achievable implementation plan, sort of on a per area basis.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the reports? Councillor De Williams.
This is to Jess. How's it going with the removal of the items at the carriage shed, with the men's shed and stuff like that?
I am not actually across that. I'm sorry. Robert, right. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Can you?
There's been a conversation with them. They've been obviously unable to access the facility for quite some time. So their ability to get in there and get the stuff out of there is somewhat restricted at the moment, but I got a little bit grumpy about it because it stopped our consultants from doing their heritage assessment and cost estimate from that. So at this stage, we're going to give them till the end of the financial year to get the stuff out of there. But again, that's going to be impacted by how how quickly we can allow access in the first place. So I've got to strike a happy medium between getting it out and getting rid of it to some extent, and a reasonable time frame to get that done.
And can I ask one more question? Not that we can run together in packs at the moment, but when would be you're having conversations still with the Parkrun Australia? Is there any sort of rough estimate when that will be available once we can, of course, COVID-19 aside, but do you know any further discussions about that?
So I'm just trying to, okay, Jess.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Jackie's been having ongoing discussions with the Parkrun people, and obviously given the situation they haven't have a firm start date, but they're certainly still keen for that to go ahead.
And that's a question to Russell. Did we get the money to do the rest of the park? Because it was reliant on some grants as well, wasn't it? To get that trail happening.
We could have had an extended better trail if we'd have got the grant money, Councillor Williams, but we didn't get that grant. We weren't successful, so we've had to sort of work with what we've got, sort of thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions at all? No, in case of that, I shall put the motion for acceptance of the departmental reports. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And Councillor Gracie, thank you.
Aye.
Unanimously. 10.0 is petitions, which we have none before us at the moment. Land use planning. The Mayor advised in accordance with the provisions of Part 2 Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015, the intention of the Council to act as a planning authority pursuant to the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993 is to be noted. In accordance with Regulation 25, the Council will act as a planning authority in respect to those matters appearing under item 10 on this agenda, inclusive of any supplementary items. 11.1 is the DAS minutes from the 5th of May 2020. We'll have a mover and seconder, thanks. Councillor Gala, thank you, and Councillor Nichols, thanks. Any comment on those minutes at all? If not, I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Passed unanimously. 12.1 is the financial hardship assistance policy. Mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gracie, and a seconder, Councillor Reid. Thank you. And GM, would you like just to explain the commercial side of things that's been added as a summary, please?
Yeah.
Yes, I might also just unmute Steph, so you can jump in as well, Steph. So it was not great timing, but after we adopted the first version last month, LGAT then provided some further guidelines around commercial properties, and the reason for the delay was because at the national level, it was being explored whether there was going to be a uniform commercial rate relief. Imposed isn't the right word, but required of councils across the whole country, which ultimately didn't happen. So then, and that was what was causing the LGAT to not be able to finalise that aspect of the template they'd already sent through. So they then did that, provided a bit more information. They actually did it as an entirely separate addendum to the policy, but we thought it was better in our circumstances just to input some extra details around the commercial side of things into that existing policy. So Steph principally did it with Betty, our Senior Revenue Officer, and it's disappeared off my screen. I'm sorry, I have to find another version. Steph, are there any details you want to talk about? Well, I'll look for my other file.
It mainly just, in addition to the previous policy, just adds in evidence or documentation that commercial ratepayers can provide council to prove that they're in financial hardship. So it just kind of extends on the evidence that can be provided for commercial ratepayers. that's the major change in the policy.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. Sorry, yeah, it was more we just fundamentally did changing, and it just provides a bit more clarity around how we may deal with commercial requests separate to, like, if you call normal requests for assistance, and the application form got modified accordingly.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Trenius. You're right to go, Colin.
Right, okay. Just, have we had many approaches by residents or any businesses, Robert or Steph, at this stage?
Yeah, I'll defer to Steph. She would know better than I would.
At this stage, I think we've had probably between 15 and 20 ratepayers contact us about our financial hardship policy, and just wanting to know the process and the application process. And we have contacted them and let them know that the policy was approved last month and then has come back to council this month. And after this council meeting, Betty and Ellie from the rates team will be in contact with those ratepayers and update them on the application process, so we'll get the ball rolling.
Oh, that's good.
Thanks, Steph. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in relation to it, like, it's great that we've got the policy, so congratulations everyone on that. I'm just wondering about how would you define it, the finish line or the end line for applications for this? Is that governed by federal and state governments and LGAT with advice back to us, or?
Through the Mayor, it's a matter for us, Councillor Jackson. So there was obviously a big push for councils to adopt some sort of rate relief approach, across the country, not just in Tassie. And the LGAT have been a massive help to this council and to me through this process, and to really every council. Say they've done such a good corralling job of information and trying to simplify these sort of approaches, so not every council having to bash one out themselves. But fundamentally, it's up to us. So they provide the template, and we could adopt it as is, or what we did was made some tweaks to it to suit us. So there's a bit of a cap on this, in that it requires us to review the situation pretty much in September, so just before the second instalment would come out for next year's rates, and we can have an assessment on who's applied or how many have applied and what the quantum is, and if that's the it, or if we need to extend it or not. So because we just didn't know, I just thought it was smarter to have a sooner review rather than assume we need to have it running for longer than maybe what we should or need to.
Thank you.
Any other questions at all? With that, I shall put the motion of departmental reports for acceptance.
No, it's a different one.
Sorry, we're on the hardship, aren't we? I've clicked over to the other one. The hardship policy, put that for acceptance. All those in favour?
Aye.
Passed unanimously. 13.1 is on page 54, which is the executive summary financial performance, April 2020. A mover and seconder, thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Reid, thank you. Seconder is Councillor Nichols, thanks. And invite discussion on this to Steph or the General Manager. Councillor Reid, sorry, Linda, I didn't see your hand there.
Thank you. Just a broad question. I guess it's more on the overall position rather than the detail of the report, in terms of the surplus situation and the underspends in several areas, that puts us in a good position going forward into the new financial year, but then there's all of the unknowns in the new financial year. I guess I was just asking for, is that how you see it, Robert, in terms of, are we in a relatively strong position, all things considered? How would you describe it?
In how many words? What's my word limit?
Oh.
I'll handball Steph as needed. She's obviously pretty well across this stuff, as much or better than I am. But my view, because this morning we spent quite a few hours working on next year's budget as well, and it's looking not as healthy as we thought it may have a couple of weeks ago. And we will have it concluded this week, and we'll have copies of and long-term financial plans out to council by the end of the week, and we'll have an actual proper workshop here at the chambers next Tuesday to go through it, because there's bits to chew through. But so next year, given the revenue losses we've assumed, is probably what we should expect. It's showing a very small surplus, but when you take into account the loss of Taswater revenue, the no increase to rates, fees and charges, some of the assumptions we made with less fee revenue from application fees and usage of facilities, it's pretty reasonable in that sense. We're getting all our fags next year in 1 year, which helps, but it also has an effect this year. So actually, I'll defer to you, Steph, as far as this current financial year, how we're tracking to date from your point of view.
Well, we're tracking okay. It's a lot to do with timing though. So at the moment, we're showing a surplus above budget, and materials and services is particularly under budget. But a lot of that is just to do with the timing of when we're receiving the invoices. So and also the reactive nature of repairs and maintenance. So we might not actually spend our full repairs and maintenance budget by 30 June. So we may come out with a better surplus or than estimated per the budget. Other than that, everything's relatively as expected, and we've just got slightly higher income because of the rates and statutory fees and charges. But really, it's hard to say. It just depends on the invoices that come in the next month.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Terenius?
Yeah, just a quick one. General Manager, I think you said at the last meeting you were going to meet with the Glamorgan Spring Bay GM, reshared services.
Yeah.
Which GM was
How
that?
did that go?
Through the Mayor, there's been a few in the last period of time. So between Steph and I, we've met with, I think, 3 of them in the last 6 or so weeks. And bottom line is we've now concluded our service provision to Glamorgan Spring Bay in IT services. So they've now secured their own IT firm to do that, and there was a slight changeover. We're still sort of making ourselves accessible with any queries through Jason, but otherwise that service has been terminated.
Okay. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you. If there's no other questions for the financial report, I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Pass unanimously. 13.2 is fees and charges. Mover and seconder, thank you. Councillor Williams and Councillor Terenius, thanks very much. And a bit boring this year with 0 across the line. Any other questions or discussion on these fees and charges, please? Councillor Jackson.
Just more of a notation for 21-22, but the differences between Sorell Ovals, Dunalley Oval, Dodges Ferry Oval in hire charges. There seems to be a fairly big discrepancy across the board. So it's not, I mean, obviously we've agreed to it this year and that's fine, no issues with that. It's just possibly one to workshop and put on the agenda for 21-22.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the right page.
I'm just.
I think it's more around the daily ground hire, but effectively Dodges Ferry Oval's half the price of Sorell and Dunalley costs more than Dodges Ferry to hire, so it just seems weird.
I might, through the mail, I might get Jess, you're unmuted. I know that, I shouldn't say no, but I presume with the Dunalley fees that the hall committee principally sets those, don't they, Jess? And they look
put forward what the fee should be, and they're also hiring a totally different standard of facility at Dunalley to they are at Pembroke Park, and I think the hire there is extremely low, if there's any at the moment.
I think if you have a look at ground and change room, it's about $128 off the top of my head for Dunalley, and Dodges Ferry is about 110. Sorell's at 228 or something thereabouts per day. But yeah, if you go through it, you'll see there's three, no issue, and yeah, it is what it is, and we'll work with that. I'm just saying for 2021-22. Perhaps, given now Dodges Ferry is probably going to become our premier facility in the municipality, playing-wise, surface-wise, the cost-wise to look after that oval, it'll be on par with Pembroke, I suppose.
I mean, through the mayor, I actually went to the Dunalley ground only 2 weeks ago and had a look, and its condition.
No, Dodges Ferry will be on par with Pembroke down the track. Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, but no, I was just saying, just in response to the difference in fees between Dunalley and Dodges. Certainly, the Dunalley ground isn't at the standard the Dodges is. As to how Dodges evolves over time compared to Pembroke is a moot point. The fact that it's now irrigated is going to have a huge benefit to its life. But it's probably more a matter we need to go through, particularly for the setting of next year after fees.
Yeah.
And what we do with some of these grounds, like the Dunalley ground, gets almost zero use. In effect, the Copping Oval gets almost zero use. I went to that today, and that's not in great nick either. But
Copping actually fields the Nugent cricket team that plays in the Oaklands competition, so that actually has seasonal usage down there.
Yeah, through the mail, I knew that used to be the case. I didn't realise it was still the case, but that ground is pretty average, the Copping ground, from my humble view.
Councillor Reynolds.
Hang on, you won't. Sorry, Councillor Rounds, I can't get you to unmute. You try it yourself.
Yep.
All right.
Right, you go.
I just wanted to touch around the cemeteries. Are they actually open to have fees at the moment, or?
Yes.
Yeah. And why is there a difference then between Dunalley Cemetery and Copping Cemetery? I thought that would be pretty standard fee.
Because both of those facilities were run by hall committees, and today hall committees have scheduled the fees and put forward what they would like the fee to be. So we had intended to make those more consistent this year, but with the hold on fees, they've remained the same.
Okay, thanks. And the other thing I want to mention, I've lost the page, but Pembroke Park, there's a penalty fee if you use the facility without booking, which is only $25. I was just thinking, should we have that at a higher penalty fee? Because it could cause a real headache, I'm assuming, if someone uses it and someone else has it booked.
I don't think it happens too often, the way that we manage it now. In the past, I believe it was more of a problem as it became a multi-use, but I'm not sure that we've even ever charged that fee.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Do we get much feedback from the users and the wider public about our fees or the level of the fees?
We have in the past.
Yeah.
We get a lot of comparison to what other councils charge, but in the research which Sonia's done a lot of amongst other facilities, you're comparing totally different operating models and levels of service and arrangements with clubs. So ours was based on recovery of our maintenance costs.
Whereas, so do you mean other councils choose to see it as a set the fees according to the user's capacity rather than relating it to the actual maintenance, actual costs?
There's different arrangements. I mean, I think down at Richmond, the club take ownership of a lot of the mowing and various things down there, whereas other councils cover those. So there's a whole array of different arrangements.
Okay, another thing we can look into down the track. Thank you.
I just thought through the mayor, I might just let Russell talk to, if I can turn Russell's microphone on, from the reg services side of things. Russell, what feedback are you aware of, if anything, about our reg services fees?
I don't think we're getting too much complaints other than people that have obviously applied this year in terms of wanting caps on various bits and pieces. But we're, from planning fee perspective, we're probably up in the top third of southern councils, but I think it reflects the amount of work that we actually have to do to process those. So the closer we can get to cost recovery, I think for all of those services, the easier it is to defend what the price actually is.
Thanks, Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the fees and charges? No, I shall put the motion for acceptance of the fees and charges for the upcoming year. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Passed unanimously. And as we don't have Sharon and Tracy here, we don't have to worry about questions from the public.
And through me, nothing, neither for this meeting nor the prior meeting, obviously, we've had anything submitted in advance.
No worries. With that, I thank everybody for their attendance, and we might just end the recording there, Robert.
The button, sorry.